In this CBT Nugget, it's time for site resilience and CAS. And what that basically means is we want to look at the high availability features of your CAS box and how it can be affected and how you would set it up across multiple sites for site resilience. I love the CAS box. Insert your own joke here. I promised I wouldn't insert my own. So tell you what, here's what we're going to do in this video. You know what? I tell you what we're going to do in this video. We're going to blow stuff up. We've got just a little bit of screen drawn, but we're going to actually set some things up here with your CAS box. And, well, you know, the way it works with me is explosions are good. We're actually going to blow some things up, see what happens here. But what we want to do is I want to show you some of your site resilience options. Now, in the last video, we kind of started this process, but I want to kind of break this down for you a little bit further. And we're going to be throwing in a little bit about how mailbox role is going to work in this and play in this, but we've got a separate video right after this all on DAGs. One of the things that we're going to want to look at is how do we deal with a CAS in a load balanced or DNS round robin environment. And so we're going to look at namespaces, your external namespaces for your CAS. And if you don't remember from the Greg Shields video, on getting started with Exchange, we need to make sure the CAS boxes are set up for an external URL. We want to look at those namespaces, both in a simple form and a multi-site form. Then I want to take you through and show you how to set up a very basic, very simple DNS round robin. I have a tendency to say that with DNS round robin, it's one of my least preferred, but there are some situations in multi-site environments where it can be very useful and save you a few bucks, which is always kind of good. And then we're going to talk about doing a more, and I always want to say proper load balance, but I shouldn't say that. Taking a look at doing a load balance, and specifically what I'm going to do is show you NLB. Now, this may not be your preferred thing to use, but it is an option, and I'll give you some pros and cons, and of course how you do it with a real load balance. I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and get started with some of the site resilient options that we have available to us. You know, when it comes to options for site resilience, plethora abounds. And a lot of this is going to have to do with, and I'll just be quite frank about this, you and I are going to talk about some stuff, but you've got to apply this to your own environment. So a lot of this has to do with how you want your own environment to be and how your environment might currently exist. So there's a lot of things or a lot of questions that come up when people start looking at site resilience, like, am I doing this just to trigger over to a DR site? Do I want multiple active sites? How am I going to back all this stuff up? Well, these questions get answered as we start making a decision on just a couple of things. First of all, one of the options is, and let me just, I managed to get it in there, is one option is that let's just pretend for a second that you're going to have a two-site kind of options where one site is going to be one site, pretend that that's a big letter I. One site is going to be active, and the other site is our more traditional kind of a disaster recovery site. It's going to be passive. So I'm going to have a passive site as well. And really, I can see, here's a circle. This would be an Active Directory site. And keep in mind what we're talking about when we do this with Exchange is we're always going to have a CAS box and a mailbox role. High speed connected to a domain controller in there. So one site is going to be the active site. In other words, this is the site where all your users are going to connect. They're going to get all their mail there. Life is going to be good, and they're going to be happy. Now, what you might want to do is consider having a passive or DR site. So a passive site. What this is really going to be is a failover site. So if site A goes out, we have a CAS and we have a mailbox. And since we're going to be talking about DAGs in more detail, but the mailbox servers will be will have a DAG database copy or multiple database copies, so that these are the active databases and with your PAMs, and if something should go wrong, then everybody falls over to the site over here where these will become active. Now that's one setup that you might want to do. Now along this setup with one active and one passive, remember I had mentioned this in the last video, when we set up our DAGs, we're going to be setting up a witness server, and we're going to do that in detail in the next video. But in order to have a witness, one challenge is that to have the witness here can be problematic. In other words, I've got a witness there, but if this whole site, Site A, fails, then I could have some quorum issues and I may have to manually go in and do. Some people like to, if they already have an Active Directory site that's separate from this, like to have a separate witness site. So you have an active, a witness site, and a passive site. And this is nice and convenient as a DR kind of recovery. It's also not as expensive because in here you need the least amount, and I should probably write least amount of additional hardware and setup. It doesn't require as much personnel, doesn't require as much configuration. You could imagine doing this, even with just one server, with CAS and Mailbox on one, you could imagine doing this. Now, one of the challenges with this will be the load balancing of the CAS. Now, remember, all your clients are your users. They're all connecting, by default to here. Remember, that's occurring through a DNS record. Now, I'm going to show you DNS round robin and load balancing, but something kind of to consider here is this option is that with DNS, we're going to have multiple records in here to get him to go to the A site, and if that site's not available, we'll have to have a record that'll point him to the CAS box over here. This also ties us into our namespaces for our CAS boxes that we're going to talk about. So DNS is going to help with us. There's also something like a global load balancer that you can use. Global load balancers allow you to do the same thing between two different sites. So you can have a global load balancer that would let you do this. The challenge, global load balancers are better than DNS round robin, more expensive, more complicated to set up. But DNS round robin, the way that I show you, will work for either a single site or multiple sites just as well. So you're going to need to keep in mind that you need name resolution to those CAS boxes. Now, one of the interesting things is that while this one's active and this one's currently passive, it doesn't have to be that way. One of the other options you have is to have more than one active site. And I have to tell you, I have a tendency to prefer that because I see this other site, this passive site, as kind of like a waste. It's not really doing anything. Sure, it's cheap, but it's not doing any work for me. So rather than passive, I kind of like to make him an active site. Now, this is pretty straightforward and simple with the CAS side of it. It gets a little bit more complicated when we look at the DAGs. So, and you can imagine that this is not going to be least amount. Oh, no, 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 my friend. This is going to cost more because you're going to want to have high availability features in both sites that are active. So doubling up on the hardware and doubling up on the configuration, that kind of stuff will go along the lines of making them both active. And I prefer to have multiple active sites. This gives me a lot of features. Let me give you one of the features that I like the best. Well, maybe two of the features I like the best. I want you to consider something. I want you to pretend that users normally are coming in here to this site and to hit their mailboxes. And let's say this CAS server should fail. Well, because of DNS round robin or a global load balancer, I could get redirected to this CAS. Now, this CAS is going to say, hey, where's your mailbox? Oh, your mailbox is located all the way back over here? That's okay in Exchange 2013. And you could do this in Exchange 2010. It was just harder to do. In Exchange 2013, that CAS box will proxy you back over to your mailbox server so you can still get your mail, even though I've lost this CAS. That's cool. The other thing is if the entire site fails, told you we'd blow stuff up. If the entire site fails, I'm going to get sent over to this CAS server through either DNS, Global Load Balancer, whatever. And that CAS server, remember, since he's got a backup database, he's going to activate that database that has my mailbox. I will then be able to automatically have access to my email now. I love having this kind of setup, and it definitely gives you a lot of coverage. Certainly costs more money, but this is the direction that we're going to go. Now, to start this process off with, we're going to kind of narrow down some of the concepts here. We're going to start by configuring our CAS boxes and our namespaces, and then we'll try it out for a DNS round robin. Now, some folks think that this is the hard part, And it's really not the hard part. It's just you have to think outside of your internal Exchange environment. We need to talk about namespaces real quick, and then we can start to set this up. Here's what we mean. Again, I'm going to do a smaller version of the picture that we just did. A small one down here. Here's a site. We'll call it site number 1. And here's a site. We'll call it site number 2. And remember, we've got users out here in the world, and when they use a client piece of software, whether it be Outlook or OWA, they're hitting DNS to get name yeah, me and my pen are not agreeing on location. Okay, so we're going to hit DNS to get name resolution, and that's going to take us to a CASBox. So we've got a CASBox in here. CASBox is here, and we've got mailboxes in here as well. Now, whether you're working with one site that has multiple CASBoxes for a load balance, or you're working with multiple sites, you have to worry about your namespace. And here's what the namespace is. The external FQDN that people are going to be using in order to hit it. Now, if you're sitting internally, you could open up a web browser and type HTTP, the name of the CAS server, and you can go into OWA or ECP. Life is good. But when you're external, you're using that external name. And that's the namespace we need to plan for. And here's what I want you to think about. We have a couple of namespaces. Some of these you're already familiar with from Greg Shields' course, but we have to look at things like AutoDiscover. Now remember, AutoDiscover is that incredible service that will automatically configure Outlook for you to get it connected using RPC over HTTPS. We also need to have an external namespace for OWA, Outlook Web App, Access App. Oh man, I still can't get, they switched the terms on me. And anyways, the Exchange control panel and Exchange Web Services. And I'm going to show you where you see all of these in the utility, by the way. And Exchange Active Sync, and you're going to have to do the offline address book. Each one of these needs to have its external address set up. And that's what we refer to as a namespace. Now, between these two down here, these two little guys, let's pretend that I want everybody, just to make life simple, everybody to have the same namespace. That, like with a DNS round robin or a global server load balancer, this is the simplest thing to do. It also makes it cheaper for certificates. You buy one set of certificates for one set of namespaces, and it makes your life a lot easier. And let me give you an example. So my lab environment here, the internal is called company, and I'll just write it up here. Internal, so that you'll see it, is company.pri. My external, just imagine how creative I was company.com. So this is the zone in DNS that I'm going to start setting stuff up in. Well, when I want to hit AutoDiscover and ECP and OWA, what I think I would like to do is have a namespace called mail.company.com. So AutoDiscover has to have its own unique record. That one has to say AutoDiscover. Dot, and I'm just going to use that company.com. But the other ones, OWA, and I'm just going to do this kind of thing. I want them to say mail.company.com. Now, like I said, this is the simplest type of namespace, cheapest amount of certificates, and this will be set up on the CAS servers in both locations, because that's where we'll do this setup. We'll set up the namespaces there for their external. And so they'll all be set to the same. When I go to DNS, I'll put in DNSA records. You're going to see me do this in just a few minutes. I'll go in and put DNSA records for mail.company.com with multiple IP addresses. IP addresses that point to this guy and IP addresses that point to this guy. And of course, in each location, those CAS servers might be load balanced, so I'll have multiple IP addresses for those. Just a whole bunch of A records, all with the same namespace. Now, there is an option where some people like to prefer to split up the namespaces, especially if these two sites, if they're both active. This one's active, this one's active. Because of something like DNS round robin, you have one of the challenges with DNS round robin is everybody may start by going to this site. that means that site's going to get hit with an awful lot of load before they get over to the other site. Also, client caching, stuff like that can cause issues with it. What some people like to do is to create two different namespaces. Now, this makes things a little bit more challenging. It's a little bit more expensive for certificates as well to have multiple namespaces. But what you could do is that let's pretend that everybody in site number 1, they're going to get a namespace of, and I'm going to write it over here, they're going to get a namespace called, and I know isn't going to be all that creative, mail1.company. And all of the DNS records for, if I have load balanced CAS servers over here, all of the DNS records are going to be mail1.company.com and have the multiple IP addresses that I need. And over here in site 2, I'll set up a namespace called mail2.company.com. Again, this is actually pretty common if you have multiple active sites and there's a lot of users in those sites. Just to kind of break up where that workload is. Now, there's all kinds of additional notes in this situation I want to start giving you about DAGs, but we're going to save DAGs for the next video. Right now, we're going to stick to CAS, and let me kind of show you how to both set up a DNS round robin. If you've never done that, it's not that big of a deal, but I want you to see a DNS round robin. And also, I'm going to show you how to do a load balance. We're going to use NLB, but this is a similar concept. Yay, finally we get to play with a real computer instead of all the screen draw stuff. Oh man, I'm sorry. There's one other thing I have to screen draw. It'll be quick, I promise. It'll be quick. Let me just get my little pen going here. So I have two CAS boxes. CAS. One of them internally is called CAS number 1. And one of them is CAS number 2. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by showing you a DNS round robin. Now, in my case, both of these CAS boxes are in the same site, but they could be in separate sites. What I've decided to do is use the namespace mail.company.com. And so I'm going to take you through this. First of all, I'm going to show you that there's nothing in DNS at .com, and then the last thing that we're going to do is go in and fill those records. But I want to show you how to configure your CAS boxes, and this is something that a lot of folks forget. I don't know about you, but I have a tendency to, I don't set up a CAS box every day. One of the things the CAS boxes must have that they don't get by default is they have to have their external address set up. And of course, that can't be done by default because we don't know, Microsoft doesn't know what your external address is going to be. So the first thing I want to do is show you the virtual directories, show you what you need to set your external namespaces up for on those virtual directories. That then sends us to what we need to deal with in DNS. And if all goes well, cross your fingers, we're going to hit we're going to hit the first server, and then we're going to fail that server and see if it still works. So, okay, I'm done drawing pictures. You're probably happy about that. Let's do this for real. First of all, let me go into the get rid of Notepad here, and I'm going to launch my browser. And I'm going to go to just internally a CAS server, just so I can get into the ECP. That's all I want to do right now is get into the ECP. Boink. And you're going to notice my screen right now is real small. I'm going to show you this. I did the very first video. I was telling you that I'm going to have to flip my screen resolution occasionally. I'm going to sign into the the Exchange Admin Center, the Administrative Exchange Center. No, they yell at me when I get those things backwards. And the reason is down here on the list, I know it's really small for you to see, but underneath Unified Messaging is servers. That's where I want to go. So now that I've clicked on servers, I'm going to go over here and magnify this a little bit so it's easier for you to see it. And here are my client access servers. What I'm really interested in at this point, and by the way, you know this from watching Greg Shields' stuff. You can go in here and configure your client access servers, put in your product keys, set up Outlook, all that kind of stuff. What I want to do though is something a little bit different. I'm going to go over here across the top to where it says virtual directories. Now by default it shows all the virtual directories for all of my CAS servers. And you can use this view if you want. I'm just going to narrow it down so it's not so confusing. I'm going to start with CAS number 1. Now there's a couple of things that we need to do. We chose our namespace. It's going to be mail.company.com, and I want to go in and I want to put that external namespace in for all these virtual directories. Now auto discovery is the one that you don't do anything with. and I'll show that to you. He's got a unique name already. It's called Auto Discover, and that's what we're going to set up in DNS when we get there. But let me show you one of the other ones, and I'm only going to do a couple of these. I'm going to do ECP and OWA, but you would usually do this for all of them. I'm going to go into ECP. And right down here, the external URL. And if you kind of remember from Greg's videos, if you do not put anything in here, this CAS server will not respond to you from the outside. So you got to put something in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in what my namespace is. And it was, okay, did I just forget what my, no, I kept it real simple, right? Mail.company. Now watch how, if I'm spelling this correct, because you know me, I'm going to spell that right. Mail.company.com. I'll click save. And that's the first one, and then I'm going to go do OA. As a matter of fact, if you do OA or ECP, it usually comes up with a message that tells you, hey, don't forget to do the other one, just to kind of be a nice little reminder for you. Oh, and there it is. You've changed it for the ECP. Make sure you change it for OA. The voice didn't help, but I was being melodramatic. So OA, we'll go down to OWA. Those are the two I want to set up right now. Notice I'm using HTTPS. Putting in what my namespace is going to be, and click save. Now I've done this for CAS1. Guess what? I need to do it for the other CAS servers. Now I want you to think about this. If you have 2 CAS servers in your first site, 2 CAS servers in your second site, how many servers do you have to do this to? Yep, all 4 of them. It's one of the reasons that this all servers view may actually be better for you, because it lists them all for you. Makes it pretty easy. Also, if you really wanted to be tricky, you could do this in PowerShell really fast. I'm just doing it this way so you can kind of see the concept. You'll notice me try to kind of stick to the graphical for conceptual reasons, but there are going to be some times we'll jump into PowerShell as well. So I'm going to do it here for CAS2 server, same thing, company.com. And if I don't screw up the spelling or anything like that, life should be good. I've done it for ECP, and now I'll go do it for OA as soon as it gives me my little message. Thank you. And I'll go down here to OA and configure him. And really, I tell you, we're really not that far off from being done, believe it or not. So I've now got the external set up. This means that if in DNS I have a record that points to these boxes, then these are now going to respond and I can get to them. It's really that simple. So don't add too much magic and complication to this. Now, of course, in real life, you're going to put real certificates on, that kind of thing. I'm just going to use the self-signed ones for this demonstration. I'm pretty much ready to go, except I need something in DNS. And before I do that, here I know I said I wasn't going to draw that much more, but I just got to make sure that we're all good. Oh, got to make sure. So here's my CAS boxes. Whether you have 2 or 4 and multiple sites, all this kind of thing. Now I have to go into DNS. I've got my external set up for my namespace. Yay, I've got the externals. Now I have to go into DNS and make an A record. As soon as I make the first A record, I'm good to go. And I'm going to make an A record called mail. And I'm going to point it to this guy's IP address. And then I'm going to create another record. Yep, that's DNS round robin called mail. Oddly enough, the same name. Point it to this guy. Here's what's going to happen in real life. We're going to give everybody the first IP address that we get, and then we'll give them the second IP address if the first IP address fails. This is here your nice, simple DNS round robin. This is a very, very simple solution, but it works, and it's simple, it works, it's cost effective because it's free. Probably not the best option, but it works. Now, one thing I want to show you to keep you in mind of this, I'm going to be using, because of my virtual environment, I'm using internal IP addresses. That's going to throw you off a little bit. This guy begins with a 192. I forget, I think he ends with a 61, and this guy ends with a .62. But it's all a 192. Now, in real life, and I'm going to try to play a cute little game here. In real life, you're going to have firewalls, and you're going to have a NAT, and your CAS servers must have a true external IP address, one that's routable on the internet. You already know that. I just want to remind you of this. So whatever those are, and by the way, I'm just making these IPs up. Please, for the love of God, do not try these in real life, because somebody's going to get very upset at me. So, but I'm just making them up. So 139, this might be 14. Those are the IP addresses that you're going to put into DNS, those external ones, because we're using global DNS. That's how we get to it. So just kind of keep that in mind, even though I'm still using the internal ones because of my virtual environment. Okay, enough with the graphics. Let's make the graphics go away. So DNS. Now, it just so happens that you can go to, I'm using Microsoft DNS, happens to be on my domain controller. In real life, you probably have a third-party provider. You'll go to that third-party provider's DNS. I happen to have the RSAT tools on my Windows 8 box, so I'm just going to start DNS management. You know, the remote server administration tools. DNS Manager is one of them. And I'm going to, oops, that's not what I'm doing. Let me go here and I will show you. Going to go into my forward lookup zones, and here's company.com, and right now there's nothing there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new A record, call it mail, and I'll give him his address. Remember, this would be the CAS server's external accessible address in real life. In my environment, it's 192.168.3 dot. The first CAS server is 61, and that one gets created. And the next one, I'm going to create the same record. By the way, notice, don't type, oh, by the way, don't type in the whole namespace here, your FQDN. See what it's doing down here for the FQDN? It's doing it twice. You don't want to do that. You just want to put in the, I know you know this, some people sometimes get a little upset and I yell at me, so I just wanted to show you. 192.168.3 dot. 62 is the other guy. So notice I have now two DNS records, both called mail, both giving out different IP addresses. That's fine. The client can deal with that. The client can take multiple IP addresses. This is all good. And it should work just marvelously. In fact, let's try it out real quick. What do you say? I'm thinking, let's get rid of this. Let's start up a brand new browser. And I'm going to type in HTTPS. Oh, I sure hope this works. mail.company.com. And there's my my test certificate. Let me click on it. Now, notice I did, woo, I don't know what happened there. I did mail.com and it immediately took me to OWA. But you know what? If I did this, HTTPS mail.company.com, so it's working. I'm just going to do ECP because I want to go to the management tool. It takes me to the management tool. And see, mailcompany.com. It worked. It worked. Come on, you got to be a little bit impressed with that. And here, it worked. It worked. It worked just fine. So I'm going to open up PowerShell. Just ping mail.company. Woo. company.com. You'll see I'm going to, right now, the 162 server is where I'm headed. So I'll tell you what, let's go kill that server. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Let's kill it. Let's kill that server. So that server happens to be this guy right here. And what I'm going to do is, you can't really see it on screen, but I'm not going to softly shut him down. That would be wrong. I'm going to test him the way that I would do it in real life. I'm actually going to hit the power, and I'm just going to turn it off. Oh, you can see the message. Sure you want to turn this off? Yep. No nice, polite shutdown, nothing. This is a true failure, my friends. A true... Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's so let's go over here, and let's see. I'm going to click on something. Let's go to mobile. See if it works. Oh, looky, wait a minute. Oh, come on. See, it still says mailcompany.com. It's going to fail on that IP address that he's using. And then sometimes he can take it a few seconds, of course, because he's got to try it. You know, try it. No, he's not going to. Then he's going to try it again. And come on, hurry up. Don't take all day. Oh, it says it can't be displayed. Come on, just try it again. He'll get, let me go in. Up, and there it goes. It actually kind of kicked me out, but there he went. We went to the other server, and lo and behold, there we are. So that's DNS round robin. Now, to be honest, the reason I got kicked out and had to sign back in again was because of the certificates. Now, you guys know that a certificate has a secured endpoint. This is one of the problems of having the certificates on the CASBox. You run into this with DNS round robin and with what I'm going to show you next, NLB. If you had and I almost said real load balancer again, if you had a front end load balancer, which we're going to talk about, you'd put the certificates on that front end load balancer, then you wouldn't have gotten kicked out and had to sign back in again. So it's one of the drawbacks to it. Now, is that a huge drawback? Well, it could be for some people. I mean, it really could be. But right now, I've created a DNS round robin. Didn't cost me any extra bucks, and it works. I mean, look at that. It works. Okay, well, I actually like this more than I lead on to. But next, what I want to do is I want to show you more of the load balancing concept. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use NLB, and we'll talk about a front end load balancer. Just give me a minute. Give me a minute. Let me start my servers back up and get the environment working again. See you in a sec. Okay, now for the more, shall we say, normal load balance approach. Yeah, yeah. One more graphic. Just one more. Just one more. It won't be one more graphic. Yeah. So here's what we're going to do. Is I've got CAS boxes. Again, these CAS boxes can be a couple of CAS boxes in the same site. You could have 4 of them in different sites. So this is definitely, you know, we've talked about the site resilience kind of stuff. So these could be in different sites. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 2 CAS boxes, and these are in the same site. And I could have 2 other CAS boxes in a different site. Remember, it's the namespacing stuff that really solved our site resilience problem. And what I'd like to do is load balance these. In the middle, I've got my little POSI, my little internet, and everybody's connected to the internet. Now, normally what you're going to want to do is try to use a separate load balancer. And that would be a load balancer that sits out in front. And now you can start to see some of the advantages to this. A load balancer out here. A lot of these load balancers, this is where your certificates go. And I just want to point out that the reason is remember when I did that I was doing the HTTPS connection, you know, when I was doing the DNS round robin, when I killed the server and was trying to flip over, I had to relog back in. That was because of the break to that SSL tunnel. If you have the certificates here, users have SSL, or their TLS, their transport layer security, to the load balancer. The load balancer is just doing regular HTTP load balancing between them. So if a server dies and you get flipped between it, SSL never breaks, and then you don't have to relog back in, and you would never know that you got flipped. Woo! There's a right there is a great example. Also, as I was saying earlier, these load balancers that are out front, they give you plenty of options for your load balancing algorithms, all that kind of great stuff. But there's I'm going to show you a simpler way without that front end load balancer, and this simple way uses a lot of the similar concepts, because one of the concepts is when we did the DNS round robin, we were putting in the IP addresses for each one of these guys. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have one unique IP address. I'm going to call this the cluster IP address. Again, it has to go through a NAT, and that IP address is the one that we're going to put in, not the ones that directly point to the CAS boxes. Now, how I'm going to do that in here, since I don't have a front-end load balancer in my VM environment, I'm going to use the built-in Microsoft NLB software. Now, NLB is great. You can use it. I like it a lot. It is something probably the least used. Everybody wants to put in a front-end load balancer, which I think, in my opinion, is the best idea to do. But you'll see how easy it is to use NLB. Now, the problem with NLB, you have that same certificate issue that we just had with the DNS round robin. So while NLB is free because it's built into server, you still have some of those same issues. But we will get a single cluster IP address out of it, so you still get that concept. Now for NLB, what we do is we install the software. It gets installed on all servers that are going to be a part of this load balance, and then we configure it. And, well, I tell you what, instead of talking about it, why don't we just do it? Let's get rid of the picture, and let's go ahead and do it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install NLB. So I'm going to install, and yeah, I'm doing this with PowerShell. You could do this with Server Manager if you wanted to. Install Windows feature, and I'm going to do this to computers, and I'm going to do it to CAS1 and CAS2, because both of them have to have it. And I'm going to install the software NLB. So The name is, and it's actually called NLB. So this, install Windows feature. What did I do? Type the required by is not support. What? Huh? What did I do here? I did something wrong. NLB. Well, I thought it was NLB. Let's take a quick look. Let me do this. Let me enter PS session. I'm going to actually go to one of those servers. I may have typed something wrong, but I'm not sure what I typed wrong because I'm doing this at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Well, it's not 1,000,000 miles an hour. Let's do get Windows feature. Get Windows feature. And let me just see here. Make sure it's called NLB. Could have sworn it was called, yeah, it's called NLB. Now let's try this again. Oh, I know what the problem is. At least I think I do. I know what the problem is. Install Windows feature. Well, let's see here. We want to install NLB to the computers CAS1 and CAS2. Cannot convert required by... Oh, sorry. I see what I'm doing. Install Windows feature, just so you know, I computer name only takes one at a time. Let me do this. Let me use what I meant to do was use PowerShell remoting. So invoke command to computers CAS1 and CAS2, which takes multiple computer names. And inside of there, I will type install Windows feature. See, you got to see me fix a little problem along the way. And I want NLB. So what this is going to, and I'm using PowerShell remoting just to go out and install NLB on those two servers. Once that software is installed, you do need to have the remote server administration tools for NLB. Now, those servers could be core boxes for all I know, and they're not, but they could be. So what I do is, since I have the Windows 8 RSAT tools, that also comes with the into DNS. So there, the NLB has now been installed on both those servers. Let me just start Server Manager and show you where you would find this. If you have the RSAT tools, you go down and see here. We should be able to find it. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Now, if you see it before I do, I know my not very good at my alphabet. So see, there it is. Network Load Balancing Manager. Woohoo! There we go. Now it's a little bit small on my screen. I can't really get it to be any larger than this. But let me just kind of show you. Right now, this management tool, and this is just a management tool, is showing me what clusters I currently have available. I don't have any, so I'm going to create a new one. And he's going to come up and he's going to say, well, what server do we start with? Where do we start the configuration? And we're going to start that configuration right on CAS1. And I'm going to say connect. He should be able to find him. Ta-da! And I'll say next. Oh, and by the way, if you were curious, yes, you could do all these commands through PowerShell, but I want you to see this graphically so you kind of get the idea. Now, the priority or unique host identifier, each server in in an NLB load balance needs to have a unique identifier. First server, you give it number 1. Second server, you give it number 2. So he gets number 1. His IP address, that's all good. The default state of the service, we'll have it as started next. This is pretty much taking the defaults. Now here's the important part. What cluster IP address do you want? Now it needs to be something that's going to be available. So you'll need an external IP address that's available. I'm going to go sit here and I'm going to ping for, I want to check. Do I have 192.168.3.200 available? Let's see. Yep, doesn't look like anybody's responding to that. So I have that one available. That's what I'll use. So I'm going to say add, and I'm going to add the IP address. This is going to be the thing that we're going to end up putting into DNS. 168.3.200. Say OK. And then next. Now, here's one of the unique parts. It confirms that for the cluster IP address. Down here, cluster operation mode. This is an NLB thing. You don't have to worry about this if you get a front-end load balancer. What basically this is saying is unicast, multicast, or IGMP multicast. Like I said, this is specific to NLB. There's some white papers on it. Unicast means that you have 2 NICs in the box. In other words, one NIC that services the outside that'll be load balanced, one NIC that has a dedicated IP address so you can manage it. Multicast means you have one NIC that we're going to put both IP addresses on. In my case, I have one NIC So we have the dedicated IP address and the cluster IP address that we're going to put it on. And by the way, if you are using NLB in real life, IGMP multicast, go look at TechNet for the white paper on it. It'll show you how to use IGMP and configure your switches for it. So here, next. NLB also has its own little built-in firewall. This is back in the days when you used to put your web servers on the dirty DMZ. Please don't do that. That would be ridiculous. And you can still use this, but right now the little NLB firewall is 0 through 65,000. It's all open, in other words, and we're going to leave that because we have a real firewall out there. So we're going to let that configure. And what's going to happen is if everything goes right with CAS1, this is going to turn to green. Now, it's a little hard to see on my screen, but it's down here. It's waiting for pending operation. And I don't really want to rush this concept or this part of him. I want him to get fully configured. Only takes him a few seconds. Oop, there he goes. He's green. Yeah, that's good. All I have to do now is go down to the cluster, which is .200, and add a host to it. And now we're going to add CAS2. Now, this doesn't require as much work when you add additional nodes because most of the configuration has already been done now. So I'll hit next. And he's number 2. And I'll hit next. Doesn't ask me about the cluster IP. And we'll be done here. As soon as he's done and they're converged, then they're load balanced. While he's finishing that, let's go out to DNS and add in our DNS record. So I'm going to say start DNS management. Yeah, I could probably pin that to my taskbar. And so we'll go in here. So go to company.com, and there's nothing in there. Cleaned out the stuff from the round robin. We're going to add a new host, and this is the namespace that I had already set the CAS boxes for. So the CAS boxes still have their external namespace. For this, it's going to be mail.com. And in here, I'm going to put in the cluster IP address. Instead of adding all those additional A records for the round robin, just need this one. Ta-da! What do you say we go try it? You want to try it? I want to try it. By the way, these are all converged, so my load balance is working. Let's go over here. Let's open up a browser. HTTPS. Let's try mail.company.com, and let's do ECP because I want to go to ECP. Woo! There it goes. And did I just do a woo? I'm sounding like that guy on like Fast and Loud or something like that. Richard or whatever. Hey, it works. It works. I can fail servers now, and I'll still be able to get to the servers. Again, with the certificate stuff, I would have to re-sign in. But if you had put in a front-end load balancer, you wouldn't have to do that. I think a front-end load balancer is probably the best solution. Well, hey, we just did a NLB. Come on, that was simple, wasn't it? NLB, that's a pretty nice simple load balance. I like this better than DNS round robin. Much simpler. You can add up to 32 CAS boxes to this load balance. Did you hear that? 32 for an NLB. Pretty easy to set up. It's free. It's in the box, and it works really well. So that's our start on getting some site resilience and high availability features into the CAS box. Now we still have to do the DAGs, database availability groups, your mailbox role. But you're starting to get kind of an idea of how things are going to work. The site resilience options, you remember we talked about you could have an active site and a passive site, kind of like a B. No, it's a P, a passive site. Kind of like, everybody does all the work in the active site and you have a DR site. Whether you do that or if you have an active site, what we have is the ability with our CAS boxes in each location. We got a couple of CAS there, a couple of CAS there. Using DNS, a round robin, or even a global server load balancer, we can we choose our namespace. We did our namespace of mail.company.com. Yes, I'm writing it really tiny because you remember. And we can send out through DNS, we can get everybody to go the correct directions with our A records, whether it be round robin, or if we're using a load balance, like we did the round robin in our namespaces, but we also did load balance. Now, I did an NLB, but a front-end load balance is a really good option. I know a lot of guys that, a big IP F5 is a real common one. The front-end load balancers can also detect a service failure rather than an entire computer outage. So they are better load balancers. This is definitely the preferred option that I like to use. As a matter of fact, I shouldn't tell you this, but I actually like to use this option, and it's not one of those approved things by the Exchange team, but something you might sometimes take a look at, a front-end load balancer called ARR, Application Request Routing. It's actually free. It's an IIS thing. It's actually from Microsoft. But a lot of people use a hardware load balancer. You put your certificates on it. You pick a load balance algorithm that'll work for you. That's probably the best way to go to handle these situations, both per site, and then you can DNS round robin across multiple sites for your CAS boxes. Well, you know what? Once again, we have arrived at the end, and so keep in mind that we're going to still do our DAGs that we still have to do in our kind of high availability site resilience stuff, but we are certainly on our way. So I hope this video has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.